Hey guys, tonight we drift back through a curtain of moss and mystery into the steamy heart of the ancient Mayan world. The air is thick with the scent of crushed copal and sun-warmed limestone. Parrots chatter lazily from the treetops while somewhere, deep beneath the underbrush, a howler monkey screeches like someone stepped on a tambourine. You're here to witness something so curiously mundane, yet so enchantingly intricate. It could only come from a civilization that tracked Venus like it was their celebrity crush. Mayan wedding anniversaries. And yes, this means watching couples re-celebrate their wedding day even though no one could quite agree on what day that was. Because when your calendar system requires 3 different count tracks and a priest to verify if today is real, you know you're in for a good time. You probably won't survive this, by the way. Not because it's dangerous, just because it's so slow it might gently smother you in historical trivia. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and the current local time in the comments. I love knowing where in the world you're unwinding from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin your trek just outside a bustling village, somewhere between present-day Guatemala and southern Mexico. It's humid, of course it is, and a soft mist clings to the fronds like gossip clings to the village elders' evening chats. A couple sits cross-legged in a clearing, eyes focused not on each other, but on the hands of the local AJKan, part priest, part astronomer, part event planner. He's muttering syllables that sound suspiciously like math problems, and pointing to a bark paper almanac smudged with charcoal symbols. Why? Because remembering your anniversary in the Mayan world wasn't just a matter of checking your phone calendar. Oh no, it was about decoding time itself. The Mayans used 3 overlapping calendar systems. You've got the Tzolk'in, a 260-day sacred cycle that felt like a horoscope mixed with a Fitbit. Then the Hab, a 365-day solar calendar that was better, but still not matching up neatly. And finally, the long count, a sort of galactic Excel spreadsheet tracking time from a mythological starting point in 3114 BCE. So imagine you and your partner were married on a day called 10-can-14 Pop, 12.18.0.3.5. Sweet, right? But 1 year later, you're celebrating on 11-Chikshin-15 Pop, 12.18.1.3.5. Romantic? Maybe. Confusing? Extremely. Anniversaries had to be calculated, not just remembered. This means every year someone, usually the same weary priest with ink-stained fingers, had to cross-reference the cosmic traffic patterns to figure out when your real anniversary fell. If Venus was too close to the sun that week, sorry, your vows might be rescheduled. Historians still argue whether these recalculations were more about religious significance or simply a matter of organizing village parties. Some believe the astronomical alignment was crucial for reblessing the union. Others think it was just a great excuse to eat more tamales. You shuffle behind the couple as they receive their sacred anniversary date from the AJKN. The priest doesn't crack a smile, but his assistant does hand them a decorative gourd inscribed with symbols, a little reminder of the day. Kind of like a celestial post-it note, but harder to lose in a junk drawer. As the couple walks off, likely toward a slow roast feast or perhaps a moonlit offering, you trail behind and realize something beautiful. The very act of remembering was a ritual. In a world where time itself felt alive, anniversaries weren't just dates, they were destinations. Of course, not everyone had the luxury of consulting an AJKN. Poorer families relied on oral memory and neighborly consensus. You imagine 2 older villagers squinting into the sky and murmuring, "Didn't you get married when the bat constellation was upside down?" And the other nodding solemnly as if that cleared it all up. Quirky fact for you. Some communities even had witness stones, small carved markers tucked along family altars. These stones bore glyphs for major life events and could be consulted like a mystical diary. If your marriage was important enough to chisel into limestone, then congratulations, you were anniversary official. You pause to rub the moss off one such stone, imagining how many fingers have touched it before you. It's cracked, worn, but still legible. A turtle glyph for longevity, a maize god blessing, and 2 paired dots signifying union. Or possibly someone's pet jaguar. Glyphs can be ambiguous like that. Now the jungle air grows softer, the light tinged with honeyed gold. You follow the path deeper into the trees as the couple you've been shadowing vanishes behind a curtain of hanging orchids. Their celebration will continue, but you're just beginning to uncover how these quiet, leafy anniversaries evolved into something utterly Mayan. Celestial, symbolic, and just a little overcomplicated. Still, there's something soothing about it. Something wonderfully dull in the best way. You feel yourself nodding with the rhythm of time. Days wrapped around cycles, names, and stars. No rush. No countdowns. Just time looping back to remember something sacred. You follow the couple beyond the curtain of orchids, the air growing syrupy with the scent of crushed marigolds and fermented cacao. There's a quiet hum in the clearing, a kind of ritual hush, interrupted only by the soft tapping of obsidian blades and the rhythmic grinding of maize on stone. This is where the real fun begins. Because in the Mayan world, anniversaries weren't just dates. They were an excuse to give gifts. Not diamond rings or surprise spa weekends, but offerings handcrafted with an attention to detail that would make a Pinterest board feel underprepared. Tonight, your couple has exchanged a pair of obsidian rings. Smooth, black, and slightly cool to the touch, these rings are more symbolic than comfortable. One small chip and you're basically wearing volcanic glass shrapnel. But hey, it's the thought that counts. Obsidian was sacred, representing strength, clarity, and the kind of elegance you get when lava loses its temper and then calms down. There's a young girl nearby, maybe a cousin or little sister, plucking yellow petals from a bowl and threading them onto a vine. It's not for a crown or centerpiece, but for a flower necklace to mark the anniversary. You watch her fingers move with practiced calm. This necklace will wilt by morning, but its symbolism, renewal, impermanence, beauty in motion, lasts far longer. You've probably never received an anniversary gift made from the same materials as ancient sacrifice knives and butterflies, but here you are. Now, the couple sits down and opens a simple clay bowl covered with a woven cloth. Inside is honey, thick, amber-colored, and shimmering like slow sunlight. But not just any honey. This comes from Melipona bees, tiny stingless creatures raised in log hives and worshipped almost as much as maize. Honey in the Mayan world wasn't a topping. It was medicine, currency, and a kind of marital lubricant, spiritually speaking. Couples would dip their fingers in the honey and feed each other, murmuring private promises while sugar clung to their lips and laughter lingered like the smell of roasting squash. Historians still argue whether this act was part of a broader fertility rite, or simply a sweet custom turned symbolic. Either way, if you're going to make a sticky vow renewal, honey from sacred bees is a decent way to do it. A fringe tradition flickers nearby. You spot an older man handing his partner a tiny carved monkey made from wood and dyed feathers. She laughs and kisses the top of its head like it's their first pet. This odd token, it turns out, is part of a lesser-known tradition. Anniversary charms carved to reflect the year's emotional tone. Monkey. Playfulness. Snake? Growth. Owl? Probably a polite warning about talking less and listening more. You sit in the shade of a fig tree, watching as more couples arrive, each one carrying something in their hands. One brings a painted gourd. Another unwraps a simple mat made from agave fibers. A third presents a clay pot etched with jaguar patterns, maybe once filled with hot chili chocolate, but now home to a single flower. And this is the magic, really. Every gift tells a story. Not just of love, but of the year behind it. A year of storms and harvests, of children born and relatives lost, of arguments over missing cornmeal and the gentle peace that follows. You lean back, feeling the stillness around you, lulled by the hypnotic repetition of meaningful gestures. These aren't grand celebrations. No gold-trimmed dresses or Instagram reels. Just hands giving something fragile, handmade, and thoughtful. You can't help but smile when you overhear a man joking with his wife about forgetting their first anniversary. He'd given her a gift of silence, which she promptly corrected with the gift of sarcasm. And now, 10 years later, they still tease each other under the glow of torchlight. Back then, love wasn't idealized as a burning flame but as a steady hearth. One you fed daily with tamales, soft words, and the occasional sarcastic jab. That kind of warmth might not be flashy, but it never burned out. The couple you've been following sits quietly, fingers entwined, their gifts between them like sacred punctuation marks in the sentence of their shared life. No audience. No applause. Just the jungle, the ancestors, and time itself bearing witness. You close your eyes for a moment, the soundscape around you humming softly, bees droning, leaves rustling, the quiet thunk of something ceremonial dropping into a clay bowl. A fringe detail drifts in like a breeze. In some regions, couples exchange tokens wrapped in woven cloth patterned to match their birth glyphs. Imagine handing your partner a palm-sized gift covered in a textile that says, in Mayan astrological code, "You're still the only one who understands my rainy season moods." Tender. Complicated. Slightly cryptic. Very Mayan. A young boy approaches, offering you a piece of roasted squash drizzled with, you guessed it, honey. You take a bite. It's warm, earthy, and sweet in a way that sticks with you, like the feeling of returning to something familiar and finding it still good. The fire crackles. Someone nearby begins to hum a tune that may be a lullaby or a slow praise to the maize god. Either way, it sways with a kind of rhythm that gently pulls you under. Not to sleep yet, but into the calm eye of tradition. You stay a little longer just watching. Because sometimes the quietest parts of history are the ones that settle deepest into your bones. Especially when they come wrapped in vines, beeswax, and soft human gestures. As the moon climbs a little higher, you trail the scent of wood smoke and grilled chilies to where the real heart of the celebration begins, the anniversary feast. Not a raucous banquet, not a parade of overstuffed plates like a wedding buffet gone rogue, but a gathering circular and low to the ground, with food that tastes like memory itself. You slide into a spot beside a reed mat, your legs already coated in the soft dust kicked up by sandals and the occasional toddling child with a tortilla in each fist. The couple you followed sits nearby, grinning as they unwrap steaming bundles of tamales. The steam rises like a blessing. Banana leaves curl open, releasing the scent of ground maize, chili paste, and wait for it, lizard stew. Yes, lizard stew. Specifically, iguana, slow roasted and simmered with wild garlic and a broth that smells both tangy and oddly nostalgic, like something your grandmother might serve if she'd had access to prehistoric reptiles. Lizard was a delicacy, a sort of anniversary protein upgrade. Chickens were introduced much later, so for the Maya, it was all about what could be hunted, respected, and seasoned with reverence. The iguana's tail, tender and curled like a question mark, is considered the prime cut. You watch a gray-haired woman hand it to her husband with a wink. Perhaps a tradition, perhaps an inside joke from 40 years of shared meals and mild indigestion. You chew thoughtfully on your own tamal, trying not to think too hard about the meat inside. Better to focus on the texture, soft, crumbly, comforting. It tastes like home, even if it's a home you've only just arrived at. The conversation around the circle is unhurried. No clinking glasses, no toasts shouted over music. Just stories. One couple recalls how it rained the day they married, and how a stray dog wandered into the ceremony and refused to leave. Another remembers a near disaster when the sacred cacao drink spilled all over the altar, and how they interpreted it as a blessing in disguise, or a very clumsy omen. Historians still argue, one older man says with a grin, whether cacao on the altar meant fertility or just bad luck. He chuckles into his cup and drinks deeply, as if challenging the gods to weigh in. Cacao, by the way, is everywhere. It's ground into a paste and stirred with chili and water until it froths. Served warm, it coats your tongue in bitterness and fire. Served cold, it tastes like an ancient promise trying to stay chill. You sip yours slowly, careful not to spill. No sense triggering a fertility ritual by accident. Another quirky addition to the feast? Squash seeds. Roasted, salted, and sometimes mixed with honey. They're passed around in a little bowl, and every couple takes a handful and feeds them to each other one at a time. It's supposed to symbolize planting intentions for the next year of marriage. Or, according to a teenager sitting nearby, it's just a reason to make dramatic eye contact while chewing something crunchy. You notice, too, that the feast is less about indulgence and more about shared effort. Every dish has a purpose, a story, or an origin known to at least one person in the circle. That tamal? Her grandmother's recipe, steamed over hot stones under the full moon. That spicy corn beer? Brewed by the cousin who swears it makes you dream of jaguars. Even the plates tell stories. Hand-formed clay, painted with patterns that spiral like vines or echo the sacred numbers of the calendar. You turn one over and trace the etched initials. Someone made this. Someone gave it as a wedding gift, maybe years ago, and now it's back in use, quietly witnessing another milestone. You hear laughter now, soft and slow. Someone's told the story of the couple who celebrated their anniversary so grandly they forgot to invite the AJKN who performed their original ceremony. Apparently, he showed up unannounced and declared their love astronomically invalid, until he was bribed with a full bowl of cacao and a new feathered tunic. Peace was restored. You finish your squash seed snack and lean back, letting the fullness of the evening settle in your belly like warm stone. There's no rush, no timer ticking, just slow bites, slower words, and the knowledge that for the Maya food wasn't just sustenance, it was ceremony. Nearby, a young couple sneaks away with a shared tamal, giggling under their breath. It's their first anniversary, and they're still not quite sure if they're doing it right. A grandmother watches them with a smile and says something about letting the maize gods handle the rest. You suspect that's her way of saying, it's fine. Just show up and chew with love. And that's the thing. The feast, like the relationship it honors, isn't about perfection. It's about presence. Sitting together. Eating food made by hands that remember. Sharing silence, salt, and soft jokes between bites. By the time the final cup of cacao is passed around, and the torches burn lower, your body is full and your mind is a little softer around the edges. You stretch your legs, sigh, and let the gentle murmur of aftermeal contentment wrap around you like a hammock. The stars are coming out. The hearth embers crackle. Someone plucks a stringed instrument made from armadillo shell and begins a slow, low melody that sounds like a lullaby for ancient hearts. You think, this is what an anniversary really is. Not a milestone marked by time but by taste. A memory sealed in honey, fire, and the patient heat of a clay oven. You barely notice yourself rising from the feast. The fire behind you crackles softly, releasing its final embers like sleepy fireflies. Your hands still smell faintly of roasted maize and smoke, and your heart, well, it's been quietly massaged by tamales, cacao, and 40 subtle glances between couples who've spent decades figuring out how to fold love into the corners of ordinary days. Now the path leads you toward the next anniversary custom, as dreamy and fragile as candlelight on a pond, the offering ceremony. You're guided by the couple you've been following, their arms full of carefully chosen items. A few maize kernels, a small jade bead, and a folded scrap of bark paper, a mattle, with something handwritten on it in looping glyphs. You're not fluent in classic Mayan, but you catch the shape of a sun, a turtle, and what might be a joke tucked in between promises. They join a slow procession of other couples moving toward the edge of the plaza where the altars wait, nestled under a low canopy of hanging vines and carved lintels. These aren't towering grand structures, just low stone platforms, warm from the day's heat and lovingly swept clean with palm fronds. On each rests a small flame in a bowl of incense resin. Copal, smoky and sweet, rises like time exhaling. Every couple approaches the altar in their own rhythm. There's no rush, no scripted ritual. Just motion shaped by meaning. Some kneel. Others simply bow their heads. A few whisper quietly, their words snapped up by the night air and filed away by stars. The couple you followed kneels together. The woman gently places the jade bead onto the altar. Jade, you remember, wasn't just precious, it was life itself. Breath fossilized. The stone of gods and kings used in burials, birth ceremonies, and yes, marriage anniversaries. It shimmered with continuity. Then, the man places 3 maize kernels beside the bead. Maize ixim was everything. Food spirit origin story. According to the Popol Vuh, humans were literally formed from corn dough. So offering maize isn't a snack break. It's a cosmic thank you. A little edible reverence. Finally, they slide the bark paper note into the coals. It curls, blackens, and disappears in a flash of orange. Smoke snakes upward. You wonder what they wrote, something poetic perhaps, or a running joke about lizard stew. Maybe it doesn't matter. The flame knows. The gods know. And maybe that's the whole point. A man nearby offers his gift in a handmade pouch. Inside, a single obsidian flake and a hummingbird feather. Fragile sharpness and impossible lightness. You hear someone murmur, balance. Another replies, risk. You think both sound like marriage. Historians still argue whether these offerings were entirely spiritual or partially performative. Social theater to reassure extended families that love was still structurally sound. But standing here watching hands tremble slightly over fire, you suspect it's something much more tender. An acknowledgement that love, like a crop, demands tending, feeding, and the occasional symbolic sacrifice. A curious fringe element shows up next. From the shadows, a woman steps forward cradling a carved toad, yes, toad, sculpted from limestone and adorned with tiny shells for eyes. She places it on the altar with great care, kisses her fingers, and whispers something toward the canopy. You lean sideways. Toads, it turns out, were symbols of fertility, rebirth, and transformation. Some regions even believed they could call rain, both literal and emotional. So when love felt dry or cracked, a toad on the altar was a polite spiritual nudge for renewal. You suppress a chuckle. Imagine sliding a clay toad across the dinner table during a rough patch. Just a reminder, honey, rain's overdue. A few steps down the line, a younger couple kneels. They've only been together a few years, and you can see them stealing glances, unsure of how to make this act feel official. They settle on placing a joint offering. A woven braid of their own hair, tied with red thread. It's simple, vulnerable, very human. You inhale deeply, letting the smell of copal wrap around you like an old wool blanket warmed in the sun. Even the air feels sacred now, saturated with the collective weight of shared memories. Some of the offerings burn. Others stay. A stone, a string, a carved jaguar tooth. But all of them mean something. In this world, anniversaries weren't just a date on a solar calendar. They were seasonal checkpoints, moments to pause, shed ego, and say, still here, still trying, still offering. And unlike modern rituals, nothing here feels bought. It's all made, found, grown, written, whispered. You start to wonder what your own offering would be. Something simple, perhaps. A folded note. A worn object that's traveled with you. Maybe just your presence. Kneeling beside someone who's weathered storms at your side. As the final couple step back from the altar, a hush falls. Not ceremonial but grateful. Like the moment after a good cry or a long laugh. The kind of silence that says, we see each other. A child runs past, trailing feathers, and giggles. An elder leans on a carved walking stick, his fingers tracing invisible spirals in the air. The flames flicker lower. The smoke grows thin. But none of it feels like an ending. You step quietly back into the circle of torchlight, heart a little heavier, but in the comforting way, like a bowl that's been filled. Remember that bark paper letter? There's a theory among scholars that some were tucked away rather than burned. Hidden inside walls, behind lintels, or under hearthstones, to be found decades later by grandchildren. A legacy of love written in glyphs only some would understand. You imagine that. A grandchild sweeping one day, finding a folded scrap that reads, "Today I gave her the tail of my tamal, and she gave me the rest of her squash." A quiet smile blooming on a future face. You breathe deeply again. The night has shifted, slightly cooler now, like the jungle's exhale. Another part of the ceremony waits ahead. But first, one last glance at the altar. Still glowing. Still holding space. You walk now along a gently worn path, the soil springy beneath your feet, the kind of ground that feels as if it's remembering 1,000 quiet footsteps. The moon's silver light filters through swaying palms and knotted vines, giving everything a faint dreamlike shimmer. As if the gods turned down the color saturation just enough to invite reflection. This is the path toward ancestral reflection, a part of the anniversary few people today would imagine. You might be thinking, hang on, aren't anniversaries for champagne and dancing? But the Maya saw them as so much more. A time to turn backwards as well as forward. You follow the couple ahead of you, now a little quieter than before. They carry no offerings now. Just themselves and a small folded cloth bundle. The air here changes, still heavy, a little cooler. You come upon a small grove circled by carved stones, each one etched with glyphs and familiar spirals. These aren't random. These are family altars, spaces where couples would return year after year to reconnect with their ancestors. The bundle is unwrapped. Inside, a piece of woven cloth with embroidery so fine it hums in the moonlight. You squint. Tiny red and black shapes stitched in rows, jaguars, serpents, maize stalks, and stars. This is a lineage cloth, passed down through generations. Each couple adds a single motif after each anniversary. A stitch, a story, a small act of remembering. They sit in silence side by side. The man traces a fingertip over one jaguar, then pauses. You watch as he pulls a needle from his pouch, threads it with care, and begins a new stitch. His wife rests her head on his shoulder, whispering something too soft to hear. Maybe a date. maybe a memory, maybe just, still here. One historical record suggests these lineage cloths were sometimes buried with their owners, wrapped around the body like a biography in cotton and thread. But some scholars argue were never meant to be buried. They were folded into clay pots or tucked under altars, given to daughters or sons to add their own stitches over lifetimes. Historians still argue whether these additions were symbolic or literal records. Were they stories, calendrical marks, or just creative muscle memory passed between generations? Maybe all of the above. That's the thing about legacy, it doesn't always pick a single shape. You walk past another couple older with hair silvered by time and effort. They don't stitch. They speak. Softly, deliberately, like reading out loud from a book only they can see. Names float in the air: grandfathers, lost sisters, old dogs, midwives, neighbors. Each name lands like a stone in still water. And it's not just memories. It's apologies too. One man, kneeling alone, mutters something with tears in his eyes. You catch the words "forgive" and "didn't know better." Even in this quiet place, people still carry what they didn't say. Beside one of the stone markers lies a curious object. A bundle of marigold petals mixed with ground copal resin. It's a fringe ritual, not universal, but growing more common during anniversary ceremonies in later centuries. The belief was that marigolds, sochil, helped carry messages to the spirit world. Their scent created a bridge. So couples scattered them across the stones, hoping their ancestors might wander through, overhear a whispered joke or feel the warmth of a shared memory. You decide to sit, cross-legged on the edge of the grove. The ground here smells like earth and sun-warmed roots. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine your own ancestors. Not just the ones you know by name, but the unknown ones. The silent chain of people who lived, loved, argued, cooked too much food, and maybe, just maybe, stitched something of themselves into you. In the darkness, someone begins to hum. Not a song exactly. More like a melodic sigh that catches the breeze and turns into something halfway between music and weather. The woman you've been following hums along, matching the pitch, closing her eyes. This is the part no one explains. How deeply quiet reflection becomes its own language. No drums, no declarations. Just presence. And in that presence you hear echoes. A grandfather's laugh. The way your mother stirred beans. The weight of someone's hand on your shoulder before the first heartbreak. In some regions, the Maya would burn chaya leaves during these ancestral moments. Chaya, a leafy green that tastes like spinach with an attitude, was said to cleanse the air and prepare the space for truthful listening. You spot a bundle now, smoldering near one of the stones. The smoke curls like question marks. A quirky addition just off to the side. A couple places a carved wooden flute atop the stone. Legend says if you blow a note and the flute returns no sound, an ancestor has answered it. You hear a soft puff. And then nothing. The woman smiles, kisses the flute, and tucks it back into her shawl. No sound is its own kind of message, apparently. You rise slowly, stretching your arms. The grove doesn't ask you to leave, but it gently lets you go. The couples begin folding their cloths, brushing stray petals from the stones, and quietly filing out. Not a procession, just a slow retreat like waves pulling back from shore. Before you go, you reach down and press your fingers against one of the carved stones. Cool, smooth. The glyph is unfamiliar, but it feels like it knows you. You walk back under the soft hush of jungle leaves. There's more to come tonight, but you'll carry this quiet, this thread of breath and memory, like a woven stitch under your skin. And for now, that's more than enough. You return from the grove feeling slower, as if the air itself had thickened with memory. The jungle's breath exhales around you, warm, damp, fragrant with crushed leaves and something spicy cooking in the distance. But the mood is shifting again, tilting away from ancestral gravity and back toward the living, toward celebration. This next part? You're going to like it. It's called the retelling ritual, and it's basically story hour with emotional baggage, family gossip, and theatrical flair. The Maya didn't just preserve their histories in stone and textile. They told them loudly, dramatically, and often with the help of some surprisingly talented amateur actors. So you follow your couple, hand in hand again, toward a large circular platform near the heart of the village. Think of it like an open-air theater, minus the tickets and pretentious ushers. In the center, a low fire crackles within a ring of stones. Around it, People begin to gather on woven mats and carved benches. It's late, but no one's yawning yet. This is the good part. Tonight, couples share the origin of their love. How they met, what nearly ruined them, what saved them, and what's kept them together. Sometimes the stories are short and simple. Other times they stretch long into the night, embroidered with flourishes, impersonations, and plenty of self-deprecating humor. The woman you've been following clears her throat. She stands before the fire, brushing loose hair from her face, and begins to speak. Her husband stays seated, eyes twinkling. She tells the story of how they met. During a planting season, when she accidentally spilled a whole basket of beans and he helped her gather them. One by one, too slowly just to keep talking. People laugh. A child imitates the bean spilling with an exaggerated gasp. The woman rolls her eyes and says, "He still eats beans like he's counting them." Then it turns. She pauses, voice softening. She speaks of a time when the drought came, and they nearly lost everything. Crops, home, patience. But not each other. "He built me a rain shelter," she says, "even when we hadn't spoken for a week." You glance around. Everyone's listening. This isn't filler content. It's oxygen. And as she finishes, her husband stands, walks to her and says only, "And I do it again, every dry season." Cue collective sigh. Every couple has their own version of the ritual. Some act theirs out like a play with friends playing side characters. One couple brings puppets, yes, actual hand puppets, crafted from squash rinds and palm leaves. The husband uses his to deliver all his lines in a high-pitched falsetto. The crowd loses it. Turns out, he used that same puppet the year they married. Tradition, folks. It's sacred. There's a teenager reluctantly translating her grandparents' love story, sighing between phrases, correcting grandpa's memory, then accidentally tearing up when they describe hiding from a thunderstorm in a granary and promising to stick together, as long as the roof held. Casual heart-melting stuff. Historians still argue whether this ritual evolved organically, or was formalized by certain priestly classes to reinforce social cohesion. But either way it worked. Retelling your love story publicly year after year forced you to reframe your struggles into something meaningful. It turned mess into myth. And honestly, what's more human than that? In some regions, a quirky variant popped up. The truth mask. Couples would wear carved wooden masks during their story. The idea being that you could say more when not quite being yourself. Sounds ridiculous, until you see a man, tears in his eyes, admitting that he almost left once, and that his wife's forgiveness still feels like borrowed magic. The mask cracks slightly in his hand. Of course, this part of the evening had its share of dramatic flair. One woman dramatically reenacts her partner's obsession with squash planting, complete with exaggerated hoeing and groans about perfect soil moisture. The crowd cackles. Her husband bows like royalty. Theirs is a marriage of jabs and joy. Another detail. Near the circle's edge sits a group of older children and teens with clay tablets and charcoal sticks. They're copying down phrases. Funny, wise, ridiculous, romantic. This forms the Anniversary Archive, a collection of quotes that gets tucked into a basket and stored in the communal house. Every few years, someone reads them aloud at festivals. You lean over and read one scratched into a tablet. "She said my breath smelled like jaguar meat, and I still married her." Romance. The fire pops loudly, sending sparks into the dark. You feel oddly wrapped in something warm. Not just the air, but the collective intimacy. This is what anniversaries are for, you think. Not the fancy dinners or photos, but this. Retelling the hard parts until they sound like stories you'd want to hear again. And yes, some stories don't end with sweetness. One older man, widowed for years, speaks of his wife as though she's listening still. He ends with, "She always hated my singing voice, but I'm going to sing her favorite song now anyway." He does. It's awful. Imperfect. At the far end of the fire circle, an elder lights a second smaller flame. This signals the transition. The stories are done. The archive closed. A hush falls again, not sad, just satisfied, like a belly full of good soup. The couples return to their mats, arms brushed lightly around each other. Some lie back. Others keep whispering, replaying jokes, quoting each other. You stretch out too, hands behind your head, watching embers float like sleepy fireflies. You think about your own stories, the ones you don't tell often enough. The ones you reshape every time you speak them. Maybe next time you'll try telling them with a little more theater. Maybe even a puppet. Or maybe you'll just remember to say them out loud before it's too late. Your eyes are still adjusting to the fire's afterglow when the first faint rhythm reaches your ears, low, steady, just on the edge of hearing. You sit up slightly, unsure if it's your heartbeat or something outside of you. Then it grows. A gentle pulse, a wooden thump like someone drumming their fingers on the ribs of the earth. Ah, the dance is beginning. Anniversaries for the Maya were never just about memory, they were also about movement. Ceremonial dancing, especially in anniversary observances, wasn't something you did at the end of a party because the tamales ran out. No, this was choreographed, rhythmic storytelling that bridged the sacred and the sweaty. You follow your couple once more, now barefoot, stepping toward an open stone plaza washed in moonlight. A group of musicians waits at one end, crouched with turtleshell drums, clay flutes, and long wooden rattles carved with spirals. The beat quickens and suddenly bodies begin to move, slow, deliberate, like plants swaying underwater. This isn't a rave. It's more like a prayer in motion. The woman you've been trailing begins to sway. Her hands trace loops in the air, as if collecting invisible threads. Her husband joins in, clapping softly on the offbeat, stepping sideways and back. You watch, entranced, as more couples pour into the square, forming concentric circles. Each ring of dancers tells a different story. The outermost couples mimic maize planting, stooping, rising, offering invisible seeds. The inner ring pulses in tighter, more synchronized patterns. Birth, illness, recovery, reunion. It's like watching someone rewind their life in interpretive mime. Here's your mainstream historical fact for the night. Many Mayan dances weren't just celebrations, they were calendar-based rituals tied to agricultural cycles and cosmic alignments. That anniversary dance you're watching? It's scheduled precisely according to the Tsokin, their 260-day ritual calendar. If your wedding fell on a Foraja day, you dance again exactly 260 days later on the matching glyph, give or take a few human flaws in record-keeping. You might wonder, did they dance every single anniversary? That's up for debate. Some historians say only milestone years merited a full communal dance, especially the 3rd, the 13th, and the 20th. Others insist it was an annual event, with regional flair and variable participation. Historians still argue whether the calendar dictated the rituals, or whether the rituals bent the calendar around them. Either way, the choreography was never random. A little off to the side, you notice a curious thing. A ritual weight belt, made of jade beads and thick leather, passed from couple to couple. It's worn by the man during part of the dance, a symbolic burden meant to represent the emotional load he promises to carry for another year. Think of it as an ancient version of renewing your vows with sweat and core strength. Once the belt is fastened, he dances with a little more effort. His steps slower, more grounded. The woman places her hand over his shoulder blades like saying, "Yep, I see you carrying that." Then, after a few minutes, she removes the belt and wears it herself, reversing the gesture. There's a mutual nod, not dramatic, but so full of familiarity that it hits you harder than any fireworks ever could. And then, because this is still the Maya we're talking about, someone releases a flock of trained macaws. Bright red, blue, and yellow feathers flash in the moonlight as they soar above the dancers. It's not entirely clear if they're symbolic or just excellent party birds. One nearly lands on your head, decides against it, and flaps toward a nearby tree with what you swear is a judgmental squawk. You smile. This is the quirky bit of the night, clearly. In some highland villages, it's recorded that birds were used to bless the circle. They flew overhead to mark the sky's consent. Or maybe it was just to entertain the kids. Either way, you're not complaining. The music deepens and the steps become faster now. Couples lock arms and spin slowly, like stars turning in a galaxy of sweat and soft laughter. One pair stumbles and falls in a heap of giggles. Another couple, much older, barely moves at all, just two people swaying in place, cheek to cheek, still in orbit after all this time. And then one of the elders calls for the mirror pass. It's a strange tradition. A small, highly polished obsidian disc is passed between dancers. When you receive it, you hold it up to your partner's face and say the first thing that comes to mind. A compliment, a joke, a line from a shared memory. The idea? That reflection isn't just about seeing yourself. It's about how you're seen by someone else. One man lifts the mirror and says, You still chew like you're mad at the corn. His partner bursts into laughter. Another says simply, "You're the only person I still like before breakfast." There's a lot of smiling. A few choked up silences. You get the feeling this part, while whimsical, is the actual heart of the ceremony. Of course, as the night wears on, the rhythm loosens. Younger couples start improvising, adding spins, dips, even a cartwheel or two, which earns applause and an affectionate eye roll from the older dancers. Someone strikes up a side rhythm with 2 sticks and a clay pot. The atmosphere softens into something like joy wearing pajamas. As the dancing slows and the drums fade into a sleepy thrum, couples begin to bow to each other, foreheads touching briefly, then separating without a word. It's not goodbye, just a pause, a comma in the sentence of their shared time. You sit again, heart still tapping out rhythms long after the drums have stopped. The obsidian mirror is passed your way, and you glance down, half expecting to see someone else's face staring back. But it's just you. Slightly flushed, hair a little wild from the humidity, smiling without quite knowing why. And just like that, the night continues on, softer now, but far from over. There's a hush again, but it's not empty. It's filled with the kind of stillness that only follows dancing. The happy exhaustion, the heartbeat echoing faintly in your ears, and the awareness that something has shifted. Couples sit close now, barefoot and flushed, their hands lightly resting on each other's knees or arms. No announcements are made, but you sense it's time for the exchange of tokens. In many Mayan communities, this part of the anniversary celebration wasn't loud or showy. It was quiet, deliberate, maybe even awkward sometimes, but it was deeply symbolic, layered with meaning and memory. Tonight you watch as couples begin producing small objects from pouches and bundles. Some carved, some woven, a few just smooth stones, but each one clearly important. The man you've been trailing carefully unties a length of dyed cloth from around his waist. It's old, frayed at the edges, but the colors still pulse faintly. Red, yellow, and blue bands in a pattern that looks almost like fire. He presses it into his wife's palm without a word. She touches it to her forehead, eyes closed, then folds it slowly and places it over her shoulder like a shawl. This is no random scrap. She wove it for him during their first harvest season together. He wore it as a headband for years, and once used it to bandage her hand after a pottery accident. Smells like smoke and time. Like them, gift exchange on anniversaries was common. But don't imagine glittery necklaces or fresh bouquets. These were tokens of use, of memory, of shared labor. A perfectly rounded maize cob wrapped in leaves. A comb made from turtle shell. A sandal sole that had walked through 3 rainy seasons. That sort of thing. And here's your historical nugget. Some archaeological digs have found these personal items buried together in special caches, suggesting that in some cases, couples would ritually bury their anniversary tokens when they felt ready to close a chapter. Not because love ended, but because a phase had passed. Like putting away baby clothes when your child starts school. One woman presents her husband with a small wooden spindle. It's cracked at one end. "This," she says, "was the first thing you ever carved for me. It still spins like you." He chuckles, possibly not flattered. She shrugs. Wobbly but committed. They laugh together, and the spindle joins a growing pile between them, bits of life stacked like a miniature altar to the ordinary. There's a fringe ritual here too. In some villages, couples would create a kaish bundle, a cloth-wrapped cluster of small tokens from each anniversary year. It stayed with the family, tucked behind a beam or under the bed, only open during certain rites. And every time a new token was added, one older one was burned with incense, sending a bit of the past into smoke. Historians still argue whether this burning was symbolic release, or a way to lighten the spiritual weight of long marriages. Either way, the gesture feels profound. Imagine setting fire to the sandal you wore on your honeymoon, because its memory has been fully absorbed into your bones. You don't need the artifact anymore. Back in the circle, someone places a single feather in their partner's hand. It's from one of the macaws, a lucky find. She tucks it into her hair and declares, "Now I am the loudest bird in the house." No one disagrees. You begin to notice how even the children have caught on. A small boy shyly gives his mother a carved piece of bark with a wobbly glyph that probably reads tree, or maybe mud. She gasps like it's royal jewelry. It goes into her sash without hesitation. There's something comforting about the honesty of these exchanges. No wrapping paper, no price tags, no obligation. Just memories you can hold. And not every token is physical. One man stands and recites a poem he wrote, comparing his wife's laugh to rain hitting hot stone. It's clumsy. Sweet. Half the words don't rhyme. And yet she's beaming like he handed her the moon wrapped in banana leaves. Later, a woman sings part of an old tune they used to hum while grinding maize. Her voice shakes. Her husband joins in on the harmony, poorly, but she squeezes his hand in rhythm. It becomes their offering. And for some, the token is service. A back rub, carrying someone's pouch, cleaning the clay from under fingernails. In fact, a cheeky fringe custom in some regions involved the man washing his wife's feet with flour-infused water, both a sensual and humble gesture. She then returned the favor with a dab of white clay across his brow. A bit of flirtation, a bit of theater, all wrapped in ritual. A couple nearby performs this exact exchange. You watch as he kneels, carefully pouring the fragrant water over her tired feet. She pretends to kick him, then giggles, dips her finger in the clay, and boops his nose instead of his forehead. He wears it like war paint. And just when you think you've seen it all, someone pulls out an old beat-up gourd. It's cracked. Wobbles slightly. This, the man announces, held the first atoll we ever made together. I kept it, patched it with tree resin, and tonight I'm retiring it. He walks to the fire, lays the gourd gently in the embers and steps back. Flames crackle. A few people applaud. Someone whistles low and slow, the kind of sound that means, well done. So yes, the exchange of tokens was a quiet highlight. Not the loudest moment, but maybe the most human. Because love in the Mayan tradition wasn't about grand gestures. It was about surviving floods and planting seasons. About the comb you carved, the string you dyed, the laugh you remembered. The stars overhead are clearer now. No clouds. The jungle seems to be listening, holding its breath. You sit very still, half hoping someone will hand you a token. A shell, a story, a threadbare sash. Just something small to say. You were part of this. But for now you just watch. 100 hands holding 100 memories. And you realize the ritual isn't over. It never really ends. It just shifts form like smoke or music. You stretch your legs just slightly, not wanting to disturb the hush that has settled like dew over the gathering. The fire's heartbeat has slowed to embers, and the final murmurs of the token exchange trail off like smoke. But the ceremony isn't finished, not quite. There's one last piece left to place in this puzzle of tradition. The renewal oath. No scrolls, no official paperwork, no you may now kiss the bride. The Mayan renewal wasn't about pomp. It was spoken under breath in hushed tones, shared between two people who already knew what they were agreeing to, but said it aloud anyway. As if the night, the stars, and the gods themselves needed to hear it too. You sit in silence as the couples begin to reposition themselves. This time it's not coordinated. There's no music, no formal line. Instead, partners simply face each other. Eyes soft, hands linked or resting gently on each other's knees. You get the distinct sense that what's about to happen isn't for your ears, but you listen anyway. Because you're here, and the jungle is holding its breath right alongside you. The man you've been following clears his throat. His wife lifts her chin just slightly. He begins. Not a speech, just a string of promises. They're practical, almost funny. I'll stop eating your tamales before the guests arrive. She smirks. I'll stop hiding your tools when you leave them out. A pause. I'll carry the water pot through the next rainy season. I'll braid your mother's hair when her hands get too stiff. Then they lower their foreheads together. One beat. Two. And in that silent touch, more is said than words could ever carry. Here's your mainstream historical moment. Among the Maya, oath renewals often followed the lunar cycle, especially during a waxing crescent phase, a symbol of beginnings and growth. While not universal across all regions, several glyphs referencing renewal oaths are timed precisely to these moons. So if your anniversary happened to fall near this phase, it was considered doubly powerful. A fresh page and the moon to light it. Interestingly, historians still argue whether these vows were meant for public ritual or private remembrance. Some believe oaths were recited aloud for the community's collective energy. Others think they were whispered in hammocks just before sleep, soft as the rustle of palm fronds in the dark. Most likely, a bit of both. Because the Maya loved duality. Life and death, sun and shadow, maize and cacao, public and private. And speaking of cacao, this next bit will wake up your sweet tooth. Many renewal vows were sealed with a sip of sacred chocolate. Not the creamy bar stuff you're picturing. No, this was thick, bitter, spiced with chili or ground flowers, served hot and frothed to a foam with a carved wooden whisk. It was more potion than dessert. Each couple receives a small clay cup. You watch as steam curls up in lazy spirals. Partners trade sips, lock eyes, and breathe out together. In some villages, a single cacao pod was passed around the circle. A symbol of unity and shared roots. A literal fruit of their labor. The kids nearby are less interested in the symbolism and more in the dregs. One little girl licks the inside of an empty cup with no shame whatsoever. And now for your fringe tidbit of the evening. In one tiny Yucatan village, there's record of a playful challenge at this stage. After taking the renewal sip, the couple had to answer a riddle posed by the village elder. Failed to answer, and they had to host the next full moon's dance. Win, and they got a basket of tamales. Stakes? Surprisingly high. One recorded riddle went, "What can hold the sun, drown a snake, and kiss the earth without lips?" Spoiler. The answer was a well. Back in the plaza, an elder rises slowly, his back curved like a crescent moon. He begins a soft chant. It's not long, maybe 10 lines, but each syllable drops into the air like a stone into water. People join in. The chorus grows, not louder but fuller, rounder. Your ears pick out familiar glyph names tucked inside the chant. Earth. Home. Patience. Corn. Time. The couple beside you begins swaying gently. Not dancing this time, just moving like stalks in the wind. The chant swells, then fades. Now there's only the sound of the forest again. A few frogs. One sleepy bird. The distant flutter of a bat wing overhead. Everything is so quiet that when someone drops a cup, the clink rings out like a bell. Nobody minds. You watch as couples now drift toward their homes, toward shared mats and hammocks, toward the warmth of sleep and the quiet ticking of time together. The fire is down to coals. One couple lingers a little longer, their hands resting on each other's wrists. They don't say anything. They don't need to. You realize that for the Maya, love was never static. It was an action, a practice, a ritual. Renewed not once but again and again, with sweat, laughter, shared tools, remembered grief, and yes, even riddles about wells. And as you settle into the soft mossy ground, your limbs heavy, eyelids tugged downward by the weight of the night, you wonder, what would your renewal vow be? What would you promise not just once but every year? Maybe it's this. I'll keep watching the stars with you, even when it's cloudy. I'll laugh at your same joke even when it's bad. I'll hand you the better blanket. You sigh. The stars blink above, sleepy and full. Almost time to rest now. But not quite yet. One last chapter remains, the fire is almost completely out now. Just the occasional snap of a collapsing ember stirring the silence. The village has thinned, and most couples have returned to their homes, swaying hammocks already beginning their gentle midnight rock. But your eyes remain open. There's something about the end of a ritual that holds you still. A sacred pause after all the motion. You lie back in the soft grass near the edge of the plaza. The stars overhead are stubbornly bright, each one a pinhole in the thatched sky of night. You think of the vows, the cacao, the tokens tucked away. And you wonder, how long have people done this? The answer might lull you. There's archaeological evidence suggesting that anniversary-style celebrations, though not always labeled as such, were practiced by the ancient Maya as early as the late Classic period, around 600 to 900 CE. We're talking over 1,000 years ago, give or take a few jungle monsoons. Of course, they didn't call it an anniversary. That's our word, our framework. The Maya track time in incredibly intricate ways. The tsokin, the hob, the long count. A couple might refer to the date of their union using precise combinations of these cycles. You weren't just married 5 years ago. You were married on 3/12 pop, or H15wa. It's like celebrating your birthday in musical notes instead of numbers. But here's where it gets cozier. The Maya didn't use these complex systems just to impress the gods or track eclipses. They used them to anchor memory. A marriage wasn't just a moment. It was a constellation of dates, tied to agricultural cycles, festivals, even celestial events. Historians still argue whether these anniversary rituals were directly tied to calendar numerology, or if they evolved more organically. Either way, when that day came back around, when the same moon rose or the same stars returned, they knew. Time to gather again. Time to remember. And how long did a marriage last in Mayan culture? That answer depends on the region, the era, the social class. But many unions were not solely romantic arrangements. They were economic, spiritual, and practical bonds. Partnerships built around shared labor and shared lineage. That doesn't make them less meaningful. If anything, it made them more necessary. You didn't marry just for butterflies. You married to make it through the rainy season with your maize intact. One charming fringe theory claims that in certain communities, if a couple survived 7 full cycles of the Hob calendar, that's 7 by 365 days, they were unofficially elevated to ancestor couple status. Basically local love legends. People would consult them like walking advice columns. One glyph even translates roughly to, "He who survived his wife's chili." A true badge of honor. And by now your body is getting heavy. Your eyelids drift, your breath evens out. But before you fade, you catch the sound of one last ritual. A lullaby. Somewhere an old woman is singing. You can't see her. But her voice curls around the night like smoke. It's a simple tune. Maybe a prayer. Maybe just a melody remembered from her own youth, when she sat in this same plaza, her own fingers wrapped around a carved spindle, listening to her husband make clumsy vows about fetching firewood and fetching stars. The song's words float past you like feathers. Stone and maize, night and day. We stay, we stay, we stay. It's enough to make your heart sigh. And yes, the traditions have shifted over centuries. Some practices were lost during colonization, others folded into Christian customs. But the thread, the core idea that love deserves to be marked, remembered, and renewed survived. Even now, in modern Maya communities, anniversary customs live on in quiet gestures. A special meal. A blessing. A whispered joke between old lovers who still remember the dance steps. As you drift toward sleep, your mind spins lazy circles. You see those worn tokens. You hear the crackle of the gourd in the fire. You taste the bitter cacao. You think. Maybe you don't need grand declarations. Maybe you just need someone who'll still braid your hair when your hands get tired. Someone who remembers your laugh from 30 May seasons ago. Someone who'll promise year after year to share their tamales, even if they eat one first. Now you're floating. Not in a dream, not quite. But in that golden in-between where stories become stars, and time folds gently like a woven sash. So let's close your eyes together. Let's listen to the earth breathe. Let's finish the story the way the Maya might have. Not with an ending, but with a continuation. Because love, like time, loops. Like vines on stone. Like a hand reaching for the same hand again and again. And again. And now the plaza is quiet. The last of the embers have cooled, their faint warmth giving way to the hush of a sleeping village. Above you the stars have thickened, their shimmer softened by the slow breath of jungle mist. The night holds you gently now like a hammock swaying on invisible strings. There's nothing left to hear but the rhythm of crickets and the distant murmur of the river, soft like a memory retold for comfort. Your limbs have sunk into the earth beneath you, and every sound is wrapped in velvet silence. Even the stories feel drowsy, folding themselves carefully, like woven blankets set aside for the morning. Let your thoughts drift now. Let them scatter like flower petals on stone. The vows, the tokens, the dance, they're still there, just blurred at the edges, softened by sleep. There's no need to hold on. Everything you saw is tucked away safely, somewhere between the stars and your dreams. And if you feel your breath deepening, your heart slowing just slightly, that's exactly as it should be. You've traveled far tonight. Not in miles, but in memory. And now your journey ends exactly where it should. Here. Still. Warm. Loved. Let the night take over. Let the dark wrap around you. You've made it to the end.